details. Take it away, Eric.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Now, there's an issue that's been keeping you up at night. You got questions. What can I do to improve business? That's keeping you up at night. That question is keeping you up at night. What can I do to improve my car count? What can I do to improve my customer flow? What can I do to improve my cash flow? Here's the answer. It's right there. And the thing is, it's been there all along, but it's easy to overlook. This is such an important point. I figured I would ask a subject matter expert to join us in this presentation. Meet Bruce Lee. Here's what Bruce Lee has to say about the fundamentals, because the phone is a fundamental thing that's easy to overlook. We're looking for all these fancy ideas and game-changing innovations, but we overlook the fundamentals. So I had to bring in a subject matter expert, Bruce Lee. Here's what he had to say. He said, I'm not afraid of that man who practices 10,000 kicks once, but I am afraid of the man who practices one kick 10,000 times. And again, quite often I'm talking to a shop owner who's looking to make changes, looking to improve business, and he'll say, Eric, what you got? I need some big ideas. And I'll ask, well, what have you done since last week with the ideas that you have? And there's silence on the other end of the line. So it's not a lack of information. A lot of times we think if car count isn't the way we want it to be, or sales aren't the way we want it to be, that we need more information. We don't need more information. What we need implementation. We need execution on the fundamentals. And we're going to talk about this phone fundamental. I want you to always remember that opening graphic of the phone with all the money coming out of it, because that's really the opportunity that's been there for us this entire time. And we're in a crisis. We're in a time of uncertainty with this pandemic. And I get all kinds of questions from people. Do you think we're going to shut down again? What do you think is going to happen to the economy? I think when you're in uncertain times, if you're in a crisis, here's the question you need to be asking. How will you come out better? How will you be better? Because I've discovered that success in life, it really isn't about having all the answers. It's more about asking the right questions. And the key is to ask yourself the right questions. We're in this time of uncertainty. Here's a great book, Measure What Matters. And I picked that book out because that's the theme of our conversation today. The phone matters. We really need to be measuring how it's answered. But he's got some great points in this book that have everything to do with what we're talking about today. He talks about there's 3 types of companies: your bad company, your good company, and your great company. And they all have different results when it comes to the crisis, right? So a bad company, when they encounter a crisis, they just go under. And I'm sure you've seen shops in your neighborhood that used to be there for a long time, but they were doing a lot of the wrong things and not charging what they should be charging and not answering the phones correctly. And the pandemic just wiped them out. They don't exist anymore. So the good companies, they survive. They get through it. But the great companies, they come out on the other side better. So by embracing what we're going to talk about today, you get to add your shop's name to the list of great companies that come out better. But we need to master the fundamentals of the phone before we can do that. Now we're talking about fundamentals. Let's highlight a fundamental problem. So studies in the automotive industry have concluded that 68% of all customers, they call the facility before they come in. 68%. So we did a study, ATI, we did a study where we actually, the instructors would phone shop locations. And they would call and see how they were answering the phone. And I'm gonna put this as a question. I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute. I'm gonna put this as a question. What percentage of shops would you say are offering the customer an appointment? I wanna hear from you. Let's type the answer of what you think. We said 68% of customers are calling. But let's type in the chat right now. What percentage of service advisors do you think are offering the customer an appointment? Let's go. I'm looking at the chat. Let's put some answers in. Okay, I see some answers coming up. 18%, 38%, 20%, 30%. Okay. All right. 30%. Okay. All right. So look, I just wanted to do that. We got 36%. I wanted to highlight the fundamental problem, because you're saying, well, what's the problem with 68% of customers calling? Only 4% of service advisors are offering an appointment. So you have a majority of the customers are calling, but we have a minority of the service advisors offering. Therein lies the problem. And this is why we need to talk about the fundamentals. This is so critical. So get this, before I go on, I just really, I need to highlight this. So if you're not focused on the phones, remember we talked about measure what matters. If you're not measuring the phones, what you're really doing is you're gambling that your service advisor is in the top 4% of America without any involvement, without any follow-up, without any interaction from you. That's not a bet that I'm willing to take. So therein lies the problem. And then, Robin, there's something that happened to me years ago that it frustrates me. Like I get upset every time I think about it. Like I get so upset, it literally makes the hairs on my head stand up. It's upsetting, it's upsetting. So I think about back years ago, I was a corporate trainer, and I used to train on the phone process. So it was for a corporate automotive repair facility chain. They were nationwide. And so when people needed phone training, they would send them my way. So I would have a person sitting in my class, and they would follow the instructions. They would be a model student. I would give them a test at the end. They would pass the test with flying colors. And then they go back to their location and not do any of those things. And they would fail phone shop. They would fail these mystery shops time and time again. And what would happen would be the leader of the shop would send that person back to my class again. And not only that, they would blame training as the problem. It was always a training issue. And the big takeaway is you have to understand if someone is not performing on the phones, we can't just assume that it's a training issue. We need to really have the right perspective as we're going to master this phone fundamental. So this tool, this framework is going to give us the right perspective. You have to look at it. Let's say you have someone who's not performing on the phone. It's head, heart, or hands. Which one is it? Let's start with the head. So it's a head issue if it can be fixed by training. If the person legitimately lacks the knowledge and skill necessary to answer the phones correctly, okay, it's a head issue. But if you're role playing with that individual and they do it perfectly, that takes the head issue out of the equation. So we need to understand, is it a legitimate training issue? And training is critical, by the way. I need to point this out. So in the culture that I came from, in those corporate locations, you did not answer the phone until you were trained to answer the phone. I mean, that's how critical it was. Like you literally had to be certified to answer the phone. I don't care what was going on. If it was busy and the phones were ringing off the hook and you hadn't been trained, all you could do was pick the phone up, politely put the customer on hold, and get someone who was trained. That's how serious it was. And if you went through all these calls without being trained, it was terminatable, a terminatable offense. So I would challenge you to put that culture in place at your location, that you don't have people answering the phone until they've been properly trained to do the same, to do so. But again, we know what a head issue is. Do they have the knowledge and skill to do it? So next, we have something that's really, really common. Sometimes it's a heart issue. Sometimes they know what to do, but they just aren't doing what they know because there's a motivation issue. They aren't motivated. The culture and the leadership at the shop isn't motivating them to do what they know. And there's two parts of motivation, right? So people are motivated by either the carrot or they're motivated by the stick. Let me explain. So the people that are motivated by the carrot, they're motivated based off of what they can gain, what they can obtain as a result of doing it. So for example, if Eric is motivated by the carrot, telling Eric, hey, we'll get more customers, we'll improve our car count, you can make more money. That's a motivator, okay? You'll win the contest. That's a motivator. But the challenge is many people are motivated by the stick. The people who are motivated by the stick are people who want to avoid a negative consequence. So some people, they need to know what's the consequence for me not doing it. So I would challenge you, if you've got someone, they've been through training and you've told them what's in it for them to answer the phones correctly and follow the process, and they're still not executing the process correctly. Part of it could be is that maybe they don't understand the consequences. So you have to ask yourself, what are the consequences for someone who fails to execute after they've been trained and given all the tools and resources? What are the consequences? And if you don't have an answer, it could be that you're lacking that piece of motivation. I mean, the consequence could be that making them understand that our car count is going to be lower. We may have less customers, or the consequence could be a disciplinary action. But we really need to be thinking about that. So we talked about, is it a head issue? Is it a heart issue? Or is it a hands issue? Now the hands issue is, do they have the necessary support to do what it is we're asking them to do? For example, let's say you've got a $1.5 million shop and it's a Monday, and the service advisor is working the counter by herself. Phones are going crazy, the lines back out the door, everybody's giving her a dirty look. The chances of her executing a great phone call are slim to none. She's going to shortchange the person on the phone. She's going to shortchange the person that's in front of her. But that is an example of a support issue. She doesn't have the support to execute on the phone. So we need to look at that. We need to make sure the staffing is right. It helps to have that person in a spot where they can do a proper phone call, away from customers, ideally. We need to make sure we've got working phones, working monitors. We need to look at all of those things before we say that it's oh yeah, it's a training issue, I'm gonna run this person back through ATI phone training. No, we need to look at that. Is it a head issue? Is it a heart issue? Or is it a hands issue? This is critical. We're gonna drill into the fundamentals. And I've broken the fundamentals out into three categories. We have smiling, we have pricing, and we have measuring. So let's tackle this. So first we want to talk about smiling. And when I think of smiling, I'm reminded that there was this Midas shop owner. He had multiple locations. And this was like in the late 80s. And he had this weird practice. He had this weird thing he would do in his locations. He would go in his locations and he would set up these mirrors in each location. And on top of each of the mirrors, it would say, how am I doing? It's just a weird thing. But when you really dig deep and you look at the science that's behind this, and we'll talk about in a second, it's not as weird as you think. His big thing was making sure that you were smiling on the phone. Like that was like his pet peeve. And if you knew him, literally, if he had to talk to you multiple times about smiling on the phone, it was understood that you weren't going to be working there very long. It was the culture. It was what they did. If you worked for him, you smiled on the phone. Again, I would challenge you to put something similar in place at your location. It has to become the culture. It has to become, this is what we do here at Eric's Automotive. We smile on the phone. But let's look at the science that's behind this. So there was a study done at Drexel University, and they studied these call center workers, people that spent all their time on the phones. A lady by the name of Kristen Bell, she did this study, and what she concluded that 14% of the person's message is conveyed just by the words. So the word that people use only accounts for 14% of what comes across. 14%. The rest of it, 86% of the message comes through tone of voice. That's powerful. That explains why two people can use the exact same script but get totally different results. Tone of voice. And smiling makes you feel better, right? When you feel better, you sound better. And when you sound better, the chances of that customer coming in go way up. Here's an experiment to try later. Test me on this. It is physically impossible for you to smile and experience a negative emotion at the exact same time. Can't do it. I don't care what's going on with you. I don't care how stressed and anxious you feel. When you start smiling, you start to feel better. When you start to feel better, you sound better. And I'm going to do this twice during this presentation. I'm going to give you my Twiggs takeaway, because I really want to emphasize. I want to make sure you're getting this, Derek. I want to make sure. I'm going to give you my Twiggs takeaway. Here's the first Twiggs takeaway. Here we go. You must focus on your tone when you're talking on the phone. One of the key things to remember, you must focus on your tone when you're talking on the phone. Smiling makes you feel better. And in case you need a friendly reminder, in addition to having the mirrors by the phones, several of our shops, they've just created this little sticky, and they have smile. And it's just, again, it's another prompt just to remind you of how important that is. We've talked about smiling. We should be able to hear the smile. And you've called businesses where you can hear the person smiling. And you've called other businesses where you don't hear a smile at all. They're just punching the clock, going through the motions. Now, this next story I'm going to tell you about pricing. That's the second fundamental. Like, we know that we should be selling the visit. The whole point of the phone, we need to get the customer into the shop. We really shouldn't be quoting prices over the phone. We can get more into that a little later. But I have an experience from my past that I have to share. And I wish, Rich, I wish this wasn't true. Like, I wish I was just making this up for the theatrics of it, but this actually happened. So I had a service advisor that I coach, and he went through the ATI training, and we trained him on how to answer the phones. And I hear the recording. He's talking to the customer. The customer asks, hey, I've got a 2012 Ford Fusion. How much for front brakes? Here's what he says. Well, yeah, see, I can't give you a price on that. See, I just got back from this ATI class, and they told me I can't give you a price over the phone. Here was my reaction. Yeah. Now, here's the thing. I hear examples of that all the time. Now, they aren't always that extreme, but I hear examples where we're explaining to the customer, like, no, I'm sorry, I can't give you a price. You have to come in. Or, hey, my boss says I can't do it. Or when you hear their tone of voice, it sounds like someone literally is standing behind them telling them they can't do it. The key thing, and the question is, what does right sound like? Right sounds like wording and phrasing it in a way that is going to benefit the customer. It's not about what you can't do, it's more about what they can do. So for example, it's, Mr. Twiggs, I understand that price is important to you. And I want to make sure I give you the most accurate estimate possible. To do that, I need to see the vehicle. Now I have an 11 o'clock and I have a 2 o'clock tomorrow. Which one works best? So you want to phrase it in a way that it benefits the customer, because it does benefit the customer. Now, first off, if you quote them something over the phone and they come in and it's totally different, you quote them brake pads, but they need rotors, they need calipers, they need other things. There's a lot of times they're going to hold you to that original estimate. Even though you say, hey, it could be different when you come in, they may still hold you to that. And that destroys your credibility, and now you're playing defense throughout the rest of the transaction, right? So that's the first issue. The second issue is price. If the customer hasn't established a relationship with you, they don't know if they like you, they don't know if they trust you yet, all they would have to go off of is price. So you give them a price, they call someone else, and that the other shop gives them a lower price, they may go to the other shop. And you've lost. So the key is to sell the visit. I mean, think of it like if you call your doctor and say, I'm having some back pain. Yeah, my back is really hurting. He's not going to say, you know what? I think you need spinal surgery. That's going to be $3,000. No. He's going to say, why don't you come in so we can see what's going on? We need to see the vehicle. We need to sell the visit, and it needs to sound right. And I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. You're saying, okay, Eric, this sounds all wonderful, but I've done what you said. I've said the words you just said right now, but the customers still insist on a price. They still say, oh, I want a price. How much is it? Well, a couple of things you need to think about. Number one, not every customer is your customer. It's possible that the customer that keeps insisting on the price just isn't your customer. As a matter of fact, some customers are what we call cringe customers. You know the cringe customer. You got caller ID at your shop. When the phone rings and their name and phone number comes across that caller ID, you just cringe. Oh. And you cringe because it's always something. They're always haggling you about price. It's never enough. They're always unhappy. And maybe they're just not your ideal customers. Maybe they're just a cringe customer. But here's something you need to think about. You need to make sure we're not being a cringe advisor. It could be that you're getting a cringe reaction because maybe we're not smiling. Maybe they don't hear the smile. Maybe you haven't established that trust and rapport over the phone. So it cuts both ways. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be you're not going to have a 100% batting average. No matter how good you get at explaining to the customer why it's not a good idea to give a price over the phone, chances are you're not going to be at 100%. But you will improve. If you follow these steps, I can guarantee that you will improve. Your conversion rate will definitely improve. Over time, you will be more successful, but you will have customers who are just going to insist on a price no matter what you say. I just challenge you to make sure that you're not being a cringe manager or a cringe advisor. Are you smiling on the phone? Are you following the process? Okay, so we talked about what right sounds like. We've talked about how we should be handling this price issue. And again, I know you're saying, okay, Eric, again, this sounds great, but you don't understand because I am a high volume tire player. So it's got to be different for me. When it comes to quoting prices, it is different. So for the mechanical shop, the shop that does mostly mechanical business, typically most of your tire customers come from when they're there already, right? You're doing the courtesy check, and then you find out the tires have metal on the inside. You make the customer aware. The customer's already at your shop. But some of our high volume tire players, many of the tire calls are coming over the phone. And tires, it's extremely competitive. So we have to, if it's a tire call, you can't just say, hey, why don't you just bring your car in and I'll give you an estimate. It works a little different. So here's some things to consider if you sell high volume tires and you have a lot of customers that call for tire quotes. You want to create a low price impression. So it is acceptable. Again, you want to quote the tires over the phone, but it's all about creating a low price impression. So how does that sound? It's, Mr. Jones, tires for your vehicle start at $59.99, $99.99. Tires for your vehicle start at. So you want to create that low price impression when you're a tire player. That's critical because it is very price competitive and price sensitive. But the other thing you want to do is you want to address the hidden objection, because sometimes the customer will say, okay, yeah, that sounds great. They may say, I'll just check around, or they may even say, yeah, go ahead and hold me a spot, make me a reservation, make me an appointment, but they have a hidden objection about price. You want to make sure that you're addressing that. So the way to do that, let's say you quote them the price, and you want to stay generally as basic as possible with tire pricing over the phone. The question to ask to get to that hidden objection is, how does that compare to prices that you've already got? Let me say that again. How does that compare to prices that you've already gotten? And that gives you an opportunity to say, well, you know, I just called shop down the road and they're $10 less. But it may not be necessarily apples to apples. You know, it could be, you know, different levels of tires. That gives you the opportunity. But I would definitely make sure that we're taking the steps to overcome or get to that hidden objection that might be out there. And then lastly, I would strongly encourage you to have a price match guarantee when it comes to tires. Because sometimes you can overcome the hidden objection and they say, yeah, I still want to check around. And then it's great to be able to say, hey, no problem. We've done the checking for you. And we're so confident of that. We guarantee that we have the best price on the comparable tire. And even after 30 days, if you find a better price, we will match it. So I've got 11 o'clock and I've got a 2 o'clock. Which one works best for you? Very important. That's a critical thing as far as handling the tire sale. And if you take those steps, you'll get more of those customers to come to you instead of the competition. Okay, so we've talked about smiling. We've talked about pricing, and we want to make sure that we're giving the customers the right explanation as to why we can't give a price over the phone and why it's not a good idea to give a price over the phone. We understand that the tire transaction is different, and we need to create that low price impression, and we need to overcome the hidden objection. So now we need to talk about measuring. Because again, if we're not measuring the phones, if we're not tracking the phones, we're gambling that our service advisor is in the top 4% of America without any interaction from us. And when I think of measuring, I'm reminded of this scale. Because I know people who have lost weight. And the main thing that they do is every morning they get up at a certain time and they weigh themselves. They measure themselves. And that can help them to make better decisions. So if they look at the scale, they don't like what they see, they know they need to make different decisions. And so it is with the phones. If we have ways to measure the phones, if we're not liking what we're hearing, we can take different actions. We can make better decisions that are going to help us to get more customers to come in. So really, I just think about that as a powerful measurement tool. Because at the end of the day, you can't manage what you're not measuring. So we're going to talk about several measurement tools. We've got the phone log, the phone script, phone shops. We're going to talk about how do we know if a phone shop is a win or not. And then we're going to get into phone recordings. And by the way, it's my dream in life that every shop in America has a way to record their incoming and their outgoing phone calls. Like if I could accomplish that, I can say that I can tell my grandkids that I've accomplished a great thing. I just think it's so important as we talk about measurement, because you can even find out through the recordings if it's a head, heart, or hands issue. So we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. So first, the phone log. By show of hands, who here, raise your hand if you have a phone log at your shop. You're using a phone log, okay? All right, see a couple of hands. You can do a paper phone log, or a lot of the management systems now, they offer electronic variation of this, but this is so important. It gives you a chance to track the customers who are coming in and what was the result of the phone call. If the customer said they were going to come in for their appointment. Now, the industry standard is that 2 out of every 3 phone calls should result in the customer coming in. So I would challenge you to make sure you're tracking your batting average. So if 66% is the industry standard, how does your average compare to that? You may be better, or you might be worse. And again, I'm measuring it by, is the customer physically standing in your showroom? Not if they said they were going to come in. So 2 out of every 3 phone calls should result in that customer physically standing in your showroom. But the phone log, it gives you a good opportunity to, let's say you talk to Eric on Monday and Eric says, oh, yeah, absolutely, I'm coming in for my tires. I'm coming in tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Thank you for making me this reservation. This is so wonderful. And then Wednesday, Eric is a no-show. You can call Eric back and say, hey, just checking in to make sure everything was okay. Are there any questions I can answer for you? So the phone log gives you that opportunity to track and measure how well you're doing as it relates to this execution. So next we're going to talk about the phone script. You could call it a phone outline. This is an ATI resource, and it's got 25 or so points on it, but it's a good check to make sure you're hitting the key elements of a phone call. I would recommend that you have this phone outline by all the phones, or anywhere where you know you're going to be answering the phone, because it's just another check to make sure that you're doing the right things. So if you're getting a phone shop, if somebody's evaluating how you're doing on the phone, and the question is, okay, what are the critical things that I should be looking for if somebody's answering the phone for me? Did you hear the smile? You should be listening. And if you listen to your recordings, which we'll talk about later, do you hear yourself smiling? Did they quote a price? And again, if it's your typical mechanical service transaction, that's a bad thing. If it's tires, like we said, it's something totally different. Did they offer an appointment? This is critical. Again, keep in mind, we said 4% of service advisors are doing this, 4 out of 100. We need to change that. And the bottom line is, would you bring your car to the shop? How did it feel? Did it feel like the service advisor was really interested in the business? And I have to tell you, I have listened to calls and I've seen where people have checked every box. And maybe they weren't smiling, but they checked every box. And they even offered an appointment. But I left feeling like I wouldn't take my car there. There was something in their voice. They didn't sound like they were interested. They didn't really have that rapport with the customer. So those are the things that we need to be watching for when we get a phone shop, or evaluating if a phone call was successful. Now, we had the first Twiggs takeaway, Now, I'm going to tell you the second one. Here's the second one. You really got to lean in for this one because quite often I'll do a phone shop. I'll just mystery shop a location, and they fail. Sometimes they may fail, and they'll go back to their shop owner and say, well, you know, I knew it was Eric Twiggs. That's what it was. I knew it was. I don't normally answer the phone that way, but I knew it was Eric, so I didn't really go through all the steps that I would normally go through. Here's what I have to say to that, and this is what you need to watch out for. How you do anything is how you do everything. So if they say they know it's a phone shop and they're not answering the phone correctly, what do you think they're doing when they don't know it's a phone shop? What are they doing when they feel a little rushed? What are they doing when the other line's ringing? So it's all about executing on the right habits consistently, but don't buy it. How you do anything is how you do everything. Hold them to that. Let's review. Let's make sure we're tracking correctly here. We talked about smiling. Remember, only 14% of your message comes through the words you use. That's why you want to make sure we can hear the smile. Pricing. It's not a good idea to give the prices over the phone. You're selling the visit with the entire customer being the exception. So make sure you're handling that. And again, don't give them your reasons, give them their reasons, right? Their reasons are, we want to give you the most accurate estimate possible. I need to see a vehicle to do that. I understand that price is important to you. So pricing, and then measuring, make sure we're tracking what we're doing, right? So at this point, we've talked about the phone log, and 2 out of every 3 calls should result in the customer physically standing there, and you have an opportunity to follow up with the phone log on customers who said they were coming in, but you haven't seen them yet. So that gets us caught up. Now we're going to talk about call recordings. So there's a lot of different ways to accomplish recording these phone calls. You know, Ring Central, Repair Pal, OMG, Kukui, Auto Shop Solutions, direct-to-you marketing. There's a lot of different ways that you can accomplish getting these phone calls recorded. But again, I would encourage you to get it in place where every incoming call and all of your outgoing calls you're able to listen to and record. But I would also challenge you to take it a step further. Here's the next step. It's good to record, but the next step is to use it as a coaching tool, right? So you've got the recording, and literally this is something you need to make an appointment with yourself to do. I know, I get it. You're busy, you got customers, you got this, phone's ringing, but you make an appointment with yourself every week to coach phone call recordings. I would literally get your phone, I would go into Google Calendar and say, Wednesday at 2 o'clock, I'm making an appointment with myself to listen to call recordings. Set a reminder. Wednesday at 2 o'clock, I'm not to be disturbed because I'm listening to call recordings. Okay, so you listen to the recordings. And then you also want to meet with the person that did the phone call. Here's what not to do. Here's what not to do is to say, hey, Mike, you know, you did this well, but next time you need to do this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. That's an example if you're coaching the call recordings of what not to do. What I would recommend is get the recording, play it for Mike, and say, Mike, what do you think of that call? And that'll tell you if it's a head issue. If he says, well, I had a friendly opening and you could hear me smiling, but I didn't offer the appointment. So you know that he knows. And then it's more powerful. Mike will really leave that session feeling accountable because he's saying, I know I need to do this. And trust me, people don't want to let themselves down. So I would encourage you to, and when you're coaching these phone recordings, to play it. hey, what'd you think of that call? And then go from there. And then the great final question is, what are you going to do differently? And the other piece of this too, don't just find bad calls. Because there's going to be times where they're hitting it out of the park. So I would find calls where Mike did it great and say, hey, Mike, what do you think? No, I think I did it just like we talked about it. Yes, you did. Great job. Because we're not trying to find what they're doing wrong. We're trying to, it's all about coaching. We all have blind spots. It's all about getting better. But these recordings, they really help us to do that. And that takes, that takes any guesswork out of it, because everybody's hearing the same information. So please make sure we are recording these phone calls. So I'm going to leave this group with some tools. So anybody that's watching me right now, you're going to get these tools just by your presence on this webinar today. I'll give you a copy of the phone script. Again, this is really like the outline, so you can see what are the key elements, what are the key components to an effective phone call. I'm going to leave you with the phone log, and I would encourage you to use that as well, or use some form or fashion of it. Make sure you're tracking your batting average. Again, 2 out of every 3 calls should be resulting in someone standing in your shop. I'm also going to leave you with a price shopper script. And these are exact words that you can use. So when the customer is insisting on a price, you'll actually have a script of exact wording that you can use to help the customer to understand that, you know, we need to see the vehicle. And then there's also a great, I'll send you the link to this great webinar that one of my fellow coaches did. His name is Bobby Poist. It's called The Psychology of the Phone Shopper. Anybody that watches that and embraces those takeaways, they'll be better on the phone. Okay, so now we're at the takeaways part of the show. And I want you to just put in the chat, what's one good idea, great idea that you got, that you plan, once this webinar is over, I just want to know what's one idea that you got that you plan to implement right away to help get better on the phone. Let's go ahead and put it in the chat. Using the phone log. All right. Good idea. Role playing. Smile. Phone log's coming up again. The phone log is so far the most popular takeaway. All right. Fantastic. Make follow-up calls when the customer is a no-show. Absolutely. Price checker, dealing with the price checker. Addressing the hidden objective. We had some good listening going on today. That's excellent. Smile. Smile and follow up. Somebody put everything. Good answer. Make an appointment. Absolutely. Get better at the price objection. Creating a low price impression. Good. Smile, smile, smile. All right. Excellent. Very good. So yeah, so just summarize some of those key points. Set up the smile reminders. Don't quote price over the phone. Implement a measurement system. Having the ATI phone script by every phone just to remind yourself of those right behaviors. So at this time, what questions do you have that I can answer for you? You can put them in the chat. Let's see. Questions, questions, questions. Don't be bashful. Okay, so here's a question. It is, what was the name of the book that you mentioned earlier? It was Measure What Matters by John Dower. Measure What Matters. Here's another question. how to smile with our masks on. Yeah, so if you're wearing a mask, yes, you can smile. The effect on the call is still the same, whether or not you're wearing a mask. So what if we can't get, I saw a good one here, what if we can't get the customer in for 2 weeks? I would definitely, you know, when we talked about head, heart, and hands, we have a hands issue at the shop. We need to really be looking at, you know, why is it that we can't get the customer in for 2 weeks? You know, do we have the right people? Do we have the right number of people? We need to make sure that we're addressing that. And can the customer, you know, are there times, I mean, maybe not for 2 weeks, but I think the key when we're dealing with customers is managing expectations. And, you know, are there other, do we have loaner cars? Are there arrangements we can make with the customer where the customer can leave the vehicle with us? Can we do drop off and pick up? Those are things we need to be thinking about. Where can we get a phone script? So I'll leave that with Karen D, my contact, and she'll send it. She'll send it to the group, and so everybody that's attending this webinar will get a copy of that. Let's see. Our low tire volume shop. Should we be price matching? I would say if you're getting a lot of phone calls and inquiries about tires over the phone, and if you feel like you're losing sales, and if you feel like customers are calling about tires and they just aren't coming in, that's when I would start to look at that. But again, a lot of the typical shops, their tire sales are generated when the customer comes in for an oil change or when they come in for a tire rotation. I feel like I now know not to give a price over the phone. Thank you for that. All right. Sometimes we have too many cars to get out. Okay, again, we need to look. I'm gonna take a sip of water here. We need to look at the hands issue and make sure that we've got systems in place to get the cars out, the right techs, the right number of techs, etc. All right, good. Yeah, we asked some really good questions. All right, so I'm gonna bring this to a close, and as I'm closing this, I just feel the need to bring back my subject matter expert. I thought that went pretty well before, so I'll have him come back. I'll bring back Mr. Bruce Lee, because he has some final thoughts that we need to understand. Here's what Mr. Lee had to say. Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Willing is not enough. We must do. So by virtue of the fact that you were on this presentation and you were watching me, you know the question that I leave you with, what will you do? That is my time. I just want to thank you. I know we've got a little bit of extra time. Certainly I can turn the meeting back over. If anybody has any other questions, I purposely left additional time for people to ask questions, but I'll certainly at this time, I'll turn the control the meeting back over to our host.
All right, good job, Eric. That was awesome. I personally have had the experience of not smiling on the phone. Somebody called me out for it. They said, "Why are you having such a bad day?" I'm like, I'm not. And they said, "Well, you sound like you are." I said, "You're right." So everybody can take something away from this. Thank you again. I don't see any final questions in the chat, but I will open it up one last time. If anybody wants to unmute themselves or type up a question really quick, let us know. No? All right.
What kind of information you guys recommend getting from the customer on the phone?
What kind of information? So
personal information, number, email, all that stuff.
Now on the phone, I would really just get the name and their phone number.
Okay.
You know, so that way, and then also what I would recommend too, it's good like at the beginning of the call to get their name and number at the, you know, up front. Hey, in case we get disconnected, it's okay if I get your name and number.
Sure.
So you can get it right then and there. I would just kind of stay basic, and then when they come in, that's when you get the email address, some of the other things.
Thank you.
I see there's another question about handling a price match.
Eric, is there like a time limit?
Can't hear. It sounds like the internet.
Eric, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I can hear you.
Is there kind of a can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a standard time limit a call should take? Let's say kind of scheduling appointments versus, I understand when you're calling a customer back to give them the details of the findings, let's say, but just kind of in a nutshell, I mean, should we be limiting our time on the phone for efficiency purposes and those types of things?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think you do want to be efficient as possible. You have to figure, I mean, everybody feels like they're pressed for time, right? So
Right.
you
Including the
don't want to be,
customers sometimes, right?
yeah, you don't want to be cutting the customer off. If the customer feels like they have more to say, I think you have to be open to it. But I think we shouldn't run into this thing where the advisor is too chatty. And the customer's like, okay, I gotta go. All right. You know, so you want to be as efficient as possible. I don't really have a time window per se. I think it really depends on the flow of the call. But yeah, we need to really be efficient and make sure we understand that the customers are generally pressed for time.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I think I saw a couple other questions in the chat. Lisa asked, how do you suggest we handle the price match? Example, do they need to bring a quote in writing?
Yeah, I would, if they could bring it in, that would be helpful. Because I mean, we need to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. So yeah, if you do get a price match, yeah, it'd be good to see it in writing.
Absolutely. And then somebody else asked, so tires are the only thing we price on the phone, is that correct?
Yes, I would say so. As a general rule, the tires, but I mean, everything else, I would really, the whole point is getting the customer into the shop.
Absolutely. I don't think I see any more. If I did miss you, please put a hand up, make a motion, something, if I missed your question.
Eric, I got one question on tires again. I just realized yesterday when we were trying to match prices on some of these tires, we were putting an our shop fee on there. I don't know what everybody else's practice is. It obviously changes the price quite a bit. Yeah. You recommend keeping that off?
Yeah, I mean, generally it's just, you know, tire to tire from a price matching standpoint. Yeah, just usually it's just strictly the tire. We're talking about price matching.
Somebody asked, so when you schedule a customer, is it okay to ask for a vehicle type?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you want to know what the year, make, and model is. Absolutely. Yeah.
Great questions, everybody. Does anybody have any
So the other thing
final
too,
thoughts?
why it's good to write that down, like when they tell you that initially, because a lot of times they'll say, hey, I have a 2014 Ford Fusion, blah, 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 blah. You don't write it down. Then you're like, okay, yeah, what kind of car is that again? And just that little disconnect could be the difference between you getting a sale or not. It seems insignificant, but in their mind, they're thinking, oh, well, he's not listening. So that's one of the powerful things with the phone log. If you can write down that vehicle information as soon as they tell you, now you look like a hero because you remembered everything.
Absolutely. All great questions. I will put it out there for one more final go about if anybody has any last questions they're dying to ask. Nope. All right. I will put my email in the chat for anybody if any questions do come about, and I will go ahead and send those on to Eric. In the meantime, thank you all for spending your lunch hour with us. Again, this will become a monthly occurrence with ATI. On the third Thursday of every month, we will be doing a lunch and learn. So be sure to keep an eye out. You register the same way that you did for this one on our website, igonc.com. We do have a fun event tonight, our monthly tire side chat, and we will be talking about marketing best practices. So I've put the link in there for registration. It is open to everybody. It is free, and it is tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time until 8. So feel free to grab dinner, drink, join us, and we'll be chatting then. Thank you again, Eric, and thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you.